Hey, how's it going? You ever look at the moon and think, God damn, I can essentially see a whole other planet from my back garden, and it's a planet that human beings have been to, and it's a planet that human beings are gonna use as a jumping off point for colonizing the universe. Isn't that insane? Well, some people don't, because they think it's a flat circle painted on the sky because they think the Earth is flat. Some people think the world is controlled by a shadow government of reptilian overlords and that the moon landing was fake and gay or whatever. Some people think the US just wasn't ready to go to the moon, so they hired Stanley Kubrick and used him as a fleshlight to fake the whole thing. So I thought I'd take the time to gather all the moon landing hoax people into one location and inform all of them that I think you're all a bunch of morons. Let's do it! So I'm going to lead by saying that nothing grinds my prostate quite like scientific conspiracy theories. Like, I can find some normal conspiracy theories passingly interesting, I guess, like MK Ultra or unacknowledged military technology or just weird mysteries or whatever. I can get that. I can see why people find that interesting. But scientific conspiracy theories are a whole other thing. They're pretty much just hypotheses about how reality works, but they're posed by morons who don't know anything about a subject, but they adamantly insist that they know better than people who have studied something for like 30 years. That's how you get ancient aliens and people thinking Atlantis was a real place. It's how you get that Hollywood actor saying that he thinks he's revolutionized maths because he thinks that 1 × 1 = 2. And when you fall into the conspiracy mindset, you end up being dragged into this insane worldview where you feel the need to be hypercritical of the actual scientific consensus, but by default you believe some shady dude on YouTube who tells you he's cured cancer by waiting until the moon is in the right phase and then drinking olive oil and rubbing his butthole in a specific way, which is fucking hilarious until it impacts real life, because these conspiracy people end up socially isolated because naturally they're completely insufferable to be around. Like, I avoid speaking to these people as much as possible. You kidding? I'm worried I'll mention I have a headache and they'll insist on holding me down and drilling holes in my head to let the demons out. And we end up in insane scenarios like Barry from down the road who thinks ghosts and ghouls exist but he doesn't believe in microplastics, and he likes Brexit because he thinks it was a type of breakfast cereal, and he gets to vote the same amount as you do. I find that quite disturbing. And you go far enough into this conspiracy shit and you end up with people who think that like climate change isn't happening or it's part of a natural cycle, which is complete bollocks. Or you get people who think vaccines are the government microchipping you. I guess eventually you just end up being a flat earther, which I think might be the ultimate state for people who only use their f***ing reptilian lizard brain to believe things which are literally right in front of them and are completely incapable of logically deducting anything else whatsoever. Anyway, one of the main entry-level scientific conspiracy theories is moon landing denial. I think it was the first conspiracy theory I ever heard about. I was like 8, I think, and by the time I was 9, I'd realized it was bullshit. I think this was my gateway to realizing some fully grown human beings just have an IQ of 70. Anyway, I know if you're a conspiracy guy watching this, I'm not going to change your mind, but if moon landing denial is an entry point to this kind of stuff, maybe I can help out 1 or 2 young people before they fling themselves into the stupid hole. Alright, so first up, people have a big problem with how the flag moves. The flag was blowing in the wind, and there's no wind on the moon, and this proves that the footage is fake. Quick question, have you ever listened to an explanation of how the flag moves that isn't the dog shit explanation you already agree with? I swear to God, given the footage available and the basic laws of physics which are obvious, the only way that you can think the flag is blowing in the wind in this footage is if your brain needs microwaving to warm it up in the morning. Yes, there's no air on the moon, so any flag is going to be droopy all the time on the moon because nothing's going to be blowing it because there's no air. Alright, I agree. And that would look pretty lame, wouldn't it? You might say it would be f***ing pointless to bring a flag with you on the moon if it's just going to look like that. So use your brain with me for this one. What do you think the US government did? Do you think NASA maybe took the time to implement the most basic, rudimentary, obvious solution humanly imaginable to this incredibly minor problem? Do you think maybe they put a f***ing horizontal pole at the top of the flagpole to hold the flag straight? Oh, why is it flapping around then? What, when they're screwing it in? What do you expect it to behave like? A solid sheet of cardboard? It's still a flag, dipshit. It's made of fabric. Of course it's gonna flap around when you're pissing about with it. And continue moving for several minutes afterwards? Why yes, the total vacuum on the moon mixed with the elasticity of the lightweight retractable flagpole itself would make it continue to move for a while after you stop touching it. Yeah, good work. It swings back and forth a bit until it stops doing that, which is precisely what you'd expect it to do. Chill the f*** out. Some folks also have an issue with how the sky looks. Oh yeah, there's no stars in the background of any of the images or the footage. Alright, quick question. Have you ever used a camera, just pissed about with a camera exposure settings? Have you ever done anything other than watch bollocks on the internet that tells you you're smarter than everyone else? Sorry, I need to stop being a dick. Listen, this one does confuse people a bit because the sky's dark in these photos like it is on Earth when it's nighttime on Earth, but it was actually daytime on the moon when the astronauts were there. On Earth, the entire sky is bright during the day because the sun's light gets scattered through it and basically the whole sky looks like it's glowing blue. And yeah, having that glowing atmosphere between you and the stars definitely doesn't help you see them. But even if you took all the atmosphere away, you know, if fucking Galactus got a straw out and went and now you're on the Earth with no atmosphere, but it's during the day still, you'd still be looking around and seeing the sun in the sky and the surface of the Earth still reflecting that light of the sun, and all that shit is still bright enough that your eyes are going to adjust to see that, and the stars will be dim enough you still won't be able to see them. It's basically just that. These pictures and video have the exposure set so that you can see the bright and dark detail in the landscape and the spacesuits, and therefore you can't see the really, really, really dim details in the sky, which are the stars. Then there's the whole radiation belt thing. Yeah, the astronauts couldn't possibly have gotten through the Van Allen radiation belts. They would have died. They definitely would have. They would have died. I love it when moon hoax conspiracy dudes say this. I think they tend to hope that the people they're speaking to haven't heard of the Van Allen radiation belts before, so they get to sound like they have some esoteric knowledge about physics, rather than revealing that they have no idea what the fuck they're talking about. See, yeah, there's these big radiation belts around the Earth, right? And yeah, ionizing radiation in very large doses is very bad for humans. And so the conspiracy conclusion is that humans couldn't have traveled through it because they'd die. And I think that's about all of the thought that actually goes into this. Again, to conspiracy folks, radiation is just some kind of mysterious thing that causes death. It's like Dark Eco from Jak and Daxter. It's just radiation equals death. And a good way to establish that they really don't know what they're talking about is to ask the conspiracy guy to remind you, you know those Van Allen radiation belts? Which type of radiation do they have most of exactly? I've forgotten. Is it alpha, beta, or gamma radiation? Which is the one that the Van Allen belts have again? And then just watch them shit their pants, because the fact that they're saying that this would kill you means that they probably don't know the answer to this question. The Van Allen radiation belts mostly have beta radiation, so it's basically electrons flying very fast, which can be stopped with shielding, which the astronauts did have some of, although they were trying to keep the weight down. So really the main strategy was to transit the belts as fast as possible and also take a trajectory through the thinnest part of the belt possible. So they kind of went up and over the belts a little bit. So yeah, I mean, it's fair to say you wouldn't want to hang around in the radiation belts too long unless you had a really, really, really big, beefy space station. But the actual radiation dosage that the astronauts got, because they were there for such a little amount of time and in such a thin part of the belt, is really minimal. The conspiracists also mention how shadows look weird in a lot of the pictures from the moon, and I know me just saying it's an optical illusion isn't very satisfying, but that's largely it. You can kind of talk yourself into thinking that the light source looks closer than it should be, like as if they're on stage with a lamp not that far away and not lit by the sun, which is effectively infinitely far away, so all the incoming light rays would effectively be parallel in that case. But the answer to this is mainly, well, one, it's the uneven topography of the moon, and two, it's a lack of any reference in the images for how far away certain things are. That definitely doesn't help. And also, the conspiracy guys have argued that it kind of looks like there's a fill light on some of the photographs, like they expect the shadows to be completely pitch black, but of course the moon's surface is really reflective, so again, just because something doesn't look exactly the way you expect it to in your head doesn't mean it's fake. It just means you expected something that doesn't align with reality, which is fine on its own, but insisting that it must look the way that you expect it to or it's fake just makes you look like a twat. Sorry to interrupt, this is just a quick message to say, statistically speaking, you're probably not subscribed, so I'll make you a deal. Press the subscribe button and I won't come over to your house and do this. Alright, thanks, back to the video. Also, moon hoax conspiracy guys mention Stanley Kubrick a lot, which I find hilarious. Like, 2001: A Space Odyssey looked very good, but not that good. The movie was impressive because when it was filmed we'd never been to the moon, so they did a great job of making everything look good now that we know what it looks like, right? It looks like they had photo reference to go off of, but they kinda didn't really. I'm gonna get a copyright strike if I try and show the footage, but just go on YouTube and look at some of the space scenes in 2001: A Space Odyssey. You can quite clearly tell that a lot of elements in the space scenes are just flat images. They're like matte paintings sliding over the top of each other. They're fucking two-dimensional. Yeah, it looks good for 1968, but you're out of your goddamn mind if you think it looks anything like the Apollo footage. People also mention missing film segments. I don't really know why that helps the moon hoax thing, because it's not as if we're missing all of it, it's just a bit of it. Specifically, there is a legitimate story about some of the film involved in the first moon landing, like, you know, that very iconic footage of Neil Armstrong coming down the ladder? The original footage of that specifically was lost. Like, recordings still exist of it, but there were higher quality versions of it. The low-res ones, I think, were transmitted immediately, and the high-res ones were basically saved for later, and I think they ended up getting either accidentally discarded or I think they were actually recorded over. I'm not totally sure. This was basically just an error on NASA's part. I guess they just didn't think about the cultural consequences of not preserving footage that was so iconic. Anyway, it's true that we lost the original version of that specifically, but that doesn't really prove anything. Like, they have high-res footage from all the other missions, and they still have the low-res footage from Apollo 11, and they still still have all the super high definition photos from all of the missions, so it's kind of neither here nor there, really. There's also other silly nonsense, like there was a rock with the letter C on it, because people, I guess, think that it's a prop that was labeled. I don't think they label props like that even on film sets, but okay. Also, those little crosshairs on all the images. There was at least one instance of one of those being partially hidden behind an object as if it wasn't edited properly or something, but that's actually just because one of the photos wasn't printed in full definition. If you get the original high-res version, it looks the way it's meant to. It's fine. It was just a reprint that got picked up that was shitty quality, and that letter C on the rock, I'm pretty sure was confirmed to just be like someone's eyelash or something. Again, I think from when they re-scanned the photo in. Just the idea that they filmed this on a set is insane. Like, I know the US government has a lot of resources, but where do you think this was filmed? Building a soundstage required for this would be harder than just going. This was the 60s. They pretty much had to film everything in camera. There was no CGI. Like, look at the space shots of the moon. Given the level of detail that we can see in the moon and the uncut shots that we have of it rotating, this would require a scale model the size of a fucking mountain. It would be like the size of Manhattan. It would be insane. I'm genuinely not kidding. I think with the technology of the time specifically, faking this would have been harder than just going. It's funny as well, I was thinking about this. I remembered someone once told me that 2 separate Apollo missions looked like they had the exact same mountain in the background, and that proved that the Apollo missions were fake because, in case you didn't know, each Apollo mission landed in a completely different part of the moon, so they couldn't have the same background, right? Now, I searched high and low for this claim again and found absolutely nothing, so I'm forced to conclude that, unless anyone else in the audience can find anything, that whoever it was that was saying this to me, that was trying to hook me on all this conspiracy stuff back in the day, just straight up made this up and found 2 pictures from the same mission to show me as evidence. Maybe they themselves misunderstood completely and thought they were from different missions when they weren't. I don't know. I can't think of any other explanation, and if this explanation is correct, it just sums up scientific conspiracy theories perfectly, doesn't it? No rigor, no sources, no checking, just say something and, you know, fire and forget. Who gives a shit? Fucking ridiculous. Anyway, I think going through all this is actually overlooking something which makes the rest of these points a bit ridiculous to even consider, and that's that it's obviously real, you fucking morons. At the launch of Apollo 11 alone, there were hundreds of thousands, maybe even 1 million people who watched the goddamn thing launch in person. They were standing near the launch site and looking at it with their eyeballs. So a giant rocket with exactly the dimensions needed to contain exactly enough fuel to go everywhere they said that they went and do all the things they said they did, with mountains of hyper-specific engineering details totally documented in publicly available schematics which are engineered to do everything the Saturn V was meant to do, definitely launched into the air, definitely used engines which visually looked the way that they would if they were burning RP1 and oxygen in the tanks like it was meant to be doing, was definitely accelerating in the way that you'd expect if the whole rocket was full of the fuel it needed to go to the moon and land on it and get back. So if they faked it, they needed to go through about 99% of the effort required anyway just to build the Saturn V vehicle, just to fool the public, and they definitely sent it to space on the trajectory it needed to be on to go where it was meant to be going, at which point wouldn't the lower effort thing just be to execute the full mission, rather than floating around there for a week doing nothing and then additionally faking all the footage they could have just gotten for real, which adds immense risk of getting caught. Also, don't you think the USSR would have been able to tell if they didn't go? You're aware they did have telescopes and antennas and shit over there, right? They were winning the space race up until the moon landing. They were almost able to go there themselves. You don't think they could have called that fucking bluff? These 2 nations were sworn enemies of each other. I don't think the bro code applies here. Whatever, I'm calling it here. I'm losing my fucking will to live. Thanks as always to my elite level supporters, Thunderbolt22A10, who lives on the far side of the moon and looks out for alien invasions, Nomad Greg, who didn't know the moon existed at all until he watched this, Andrew Mall, who left his car keys on the moon again, John Bejarano, who blew up the moon with a laser blast but gathered the Dragon Balls and fixed it, JDK, who invented the concept of mooning someone, as in pulling your pants down and showing them your arse when he mooned the moon and the moon mooned him back, and thanks to all my other supporters too. Just so you know, I'm heading out on holiday tomorrow, so if there's not a video next week, it's because I'm pounding brewskis and frying myself with ultraviolet radiation on an undisclosed Spanish beach, but I'll be back to my regular schedule the week after. Join the Patreon or the channel membership if you want to be in the credits or chat on Discord or whatever, and as always, I'll catch you in the next one. Over and out.